Okay, well, 1 o'clock. First, like to thank everybody for joining us today for part 5 of our 6-part webinar series. Are you ready for digital manufacturing? Next slide, Jeff. So my name is Jim Mansfield, and I'm honored to be leading the Matrix Manufacturing Intelligence Division. And I'm joined today by Jeff Panning, who's a member of our MI leadership team, focusing on program management, which encompasses our standards development when it comes to project execution and program function. Together, we're going to begin to unpack what we mean when we say focused execution. And that, of course, as it pertains to digital manufacturing projects and or programs. As we do at the beginning of all of our webinars, you have to listen to me wax poetic for about 4 minutes on Matrix Technologies. We'll hit it at a high level, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Panning, our subject matter expert, to take the lion's share of the webinar. So, Jeff, next one. Thank you, sir. So today, Matrix is north of 40 years old, starting back in the 1980 timeframe. We are more than 325 employees and continuing to grow at just a really rapid pace, continuing to build our talent pool over the last couple of years and moving into 2023. Over 75 million. Actually, I think we may be dangerously close to 85 million this year. While the majority of our work is located in the lower 48 here in the U.S., we have and will continue to support and follow our clients internationally as well. So we have been resoundingly successful over the last 40 years in the development of true partnering client relationships, and where we've become their go-to for virtually any type of automation or engineering type project. And this has led to over 85% of our projects being basically additional and ongoing engagements with that close group of partnering clients. Jeff? So I'm not going to read through each or concentrate any, but just think of us as focusing in the industrial manufacturing industry. Not commercial, no government projects. Our experience and years of success focusing on the above markets really enable us to pick new ideas out of specific markets and carry them on to other markets to provide new ideas and insights to our partners. So this is a good high-level representation of our primary services, but this webinar series, the past 4, this the 5th one and the 6th one coming, is going to be focused on how our manufacturing intelligence and digital transformation division helps our clients digitally transform not only the plant floor, but the entire enterprise. So, Jeff, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. So what are we going to cover today, my friend?
All right, thanks, Jim. So today we're going to talk about focused project execution. And the main points I want to get across are that really it's made up of looking through a lens of people, processes, and tools. And so we're going to talk about a little bit about both of each of those. I'm going to summarize, and then we're going to have some Q&A at the end. So let's dive into it. So on the people side of things, focused execution really starts with teams that operate on with shared culture and values. Really foundational to ensure that everyone's working toward the same North Star at the root level, even before aligning on project goals and objectives. So at Matrix, we have 31 Matrix fundamentals that really speak to our culture and really guide us to how we work and how we live. And I'm going to touch on a couple here, and I think Jim's going to touch on a couple as well. The first one is really do the right things always. So it's really about integrity and honesty and operating that way on a regular basis in all we do. And then the last one is keep things fun. So it reminds us to not take ourselves too seriously at all times, to have some fun along the way and enjoy the work that we're doing. So Jim, do you want to share a couple?
I do, Jeff, and I'm really excited we started here. our fundamentals, in short, are really who we are as an organization. They're what our clients have come to expect from us. And while I don't want to dig too deep, there are a couple I do want to mention that kind of stick out for today's topic. The first one is our number 5, or deliver legendary service. And that's what today's webinar is truly about, is our focused execution enables that legendary service on every one of our projects. 2 more. Let's do number 18, using best practices. We've developed a ton of best practices throughout our entire organization and within our manufacturing intelligence division that enables repeatable successes during discovery, planning, design, execution, startup, validation, etc., whenever needed. And the last one I'll touch base on is our number 22, which is using data to make decisions, right? And that's what digital transformation and digital manufacturing is all about. So we simply folded the concept into our matrix organization as well. It's good stuff, Jeff.
Okay, great. Okay, so along with shared culture and values, focused execution also stems from collaborative team approach. People are more productive and effective when they know what to expect, what's happening, and what's coming up. So in this collaborative approach, we can face typical challenges on a project in a more proactive manner. And so I've just brought up a few examples here of challenges, our collaborative approach, and the new outcome based on that collaborative approach. So you sometimes see stakeholder misalignment during projects where stakeholders just are not on the same page, not sure what's going on, not sure what's coming up, and things like that. Our approach to that is right at the beginning, having a very good customer kickoff, where we're getting everyone together, talk about the project, talk about the goals of the project, setting expectations, aligning on how we're going to work together, and just to name a few things. And getting into how we're going to work together, we develop working agreements. And so the team comes together and basically sets agreement on how we're going to do certain things. One example might be how we're going to meet. Are we going to meet on a regular once a week basis? Are we going to have daily huddles? Are we going to meet just bi-weekly? And what's going to be discussed during those meetings? So everyone has buy-in to that process, and we're all discussing it up front, so it's more proactive. Everyone's on the same page. So when we get to executing the project further, we're all on the same line and aligned with how we're going to operate. Not just meetings, but other decision making and things like that as well. The other aspect of alignment is holding retrospective. So holding occasional meetings where we're getting together to see how things are working. What's working well, what's not working so well, where do we need to make improvements? So we're getting that feedback on a regular basis from all the stakeholders on the project. The outcomes of this are better team harmony, faster sign-offs in the work that's being done, and faster decision-making as well, because everyone is aligned. The second challenge that we sometimes see is missed requirements, or you may see on a project occasionally. So the collaborative approach to this is really what I call a progressive approach, where we start at a higher level to define those requirements, and then we'll really dig down deep with people actually doing that work to understand the requirements and how it affects them day in and day out. And so getting end user engagement from the people actually doing the work is really critical in this aspect. And so we use what I call a human-centered design approach, where we're working with those people doing the work, looking to see what challenges they may have, better understanding those, working with them to design solutions, testing and prototyping those solutions before we ever develop them. So when we get to the point that we're actually ready to develop, it's already vetted out and everyone's on the same page and it makes sense to everyone. So the outcomes of this are really better buy-in, problems are addressed earlier, improved quality, and less rework. So the final example is around lack of adoption, where if you implement something and it's not used perhaps, or not used the way it was intended to be used. And so the proactive approach to this really starts with having a defined change process, where you look to basically, and this is one of the things you go through in the kickoff, is How are you going to identify the changes? How are you going to make sure that people are aware of those changes and understand what the benefit of making changes are? How are you going to make sure people understand what the new work is, let them practice, and then reinforce it as you go forward and start executing that work? And so it involves engagement. You need openness so people feel like they can provide feedback during the process, which requires trust that you have to develop throughout the process, starting with the kickoff. And then again, there's an opportunity for retrospectives to get feedback from people on a regular basis on how things are working, where do they see any gaps, and so you can make those improvements during the project versus after the project. The outcomes of this are really better and accelerated change adoption, faster outcome realization, and better and faster ROI. So a couple of other common challenges I didn't go into here, but that we do use this collaborative approach for are slow decision making to speed that up, and then also repeated issues and mistakes to make sure that those are not repeated on an ongoing basis. Jim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Jeff, that last one, the whole lack of adoption, when I think of change management, change acceleration, change adoption, they're so incredibly important to a project and overall program success. And my heavens, during my last 35-year career, I can't tell you how many times that I have run into clients that tell me about old projects that they completed that it just simply didn't stick, or didn't provide the value or ROI that was expected, or software that had become shelfware. It was used for about a year and just kind of tailed off. At Matrix, we really try to focus on the importance of managing change before we ever really get started on a project, and then maintain a laser focus on managing change throughout the entire project and beyond. In fact, it's so vitally important. We're actually going to close out our 6-part webinar series in late November, actually November 30th, with one on change management, making change stick. So be on the lookout for that invitation to join us for that one. I guess a quick story, Jeff, earlier on in my career, and I'm talking 25 years or so ago, I was leading a team to put in a very large spark plug manufacturing line. This was an $8-10 million project back then. And as we're about ready to start up and start doing site acceptance testing, I noticed 4 or 5 people standing over at the wall. A couple of them had their foot on the wall, arms folded, watching, chatting back and forth. And I'd never met any of these people. And sure enough, it was a line supervisor, 2 or 3 of the operators, a maintenance tech, etc. And they started pointing out things that they said weren't going to work. Don't use those lights. Who thought about that PLC configuration? There's not enough human machine interfaces on the machine. And I thought to myself then, this would have been really good to know before we started off the project on the design, the functional requirements, etc. And from that day forward, that change management during functional requirements and discovery development or digital transformation assessments becomes so vitally important. Just if you take anything away out of this, don't miss that part. It's absolutely enormous. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, that could easily be a 6th challenge to projects also, miss stakeholders. There's
Absolutely.
could be a real challenge if you get far enough into the project to identify, oh, I needed so-and-so because of their expertise, or that they are part of this process, and don't identify that until too late in the process. So that's another opportunity for the collaborative approach, starting with the kickoff to really identify all the right stakeholders.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the looking at focused execution through the process. So from the process side of things, there's also a side of the collaborative approach that we just mentioned. And we believe that collaborative approach is best executed through interactive workshops. There's the best situation is when there's a neutral facilitator that basically guides subject matter experts through those workshops, through processes, exercises, and things like that to meet the desired outcomes. Now I say a neutral facilitator, and really the reason behind that is that the facilitator focuses on the process of the workshop, not necessarily the content of what's being discussed. The subject matter expert is coming in knowing that content because it's typically something that they do on a regular basis. They know it, they know what works, what doesn't work, and they're part of the solution in the workshop. But the neutral facilitator is really a person that comes in and designs the workshop based on what they know and what they're trying to get out of it. They're really the process expert. They know the exercises to use to get to the best outcomes. They know the techniques and methods to use to make sure that everyone is involved in the conversation. You know, no one's being left out, everyone's participating. Know how to manage people's energy, because if you have a long workshop, you've probably sat through them before, that, you know, at certain times you're just low on energy, you're drained, especially if it's things that you're not used to doing and things like that. So an experienced neutral facilitator will basically even those out throughout the workshop, so everyone's able to contribute. They visualize the conversation. So basically one thing that they do is basically, instead of everyone taking individual notes, they'll put notes up using something like if you're in person, maybe a whiteboard, or if you're remote, maybe a tool like Miro that we're going to talk about in a little bit, where you can use sticky notes and things like that to make everything visual so everyone can follow along with where you're at. They're an advocate, like I said, for the people in the workshop to make sure everyone's engaged, everyone has an equal voice. And they enable a strong finish. They enable to make sure that there's going to be a decision at the end, and they're going to make sure that there's clear next steps and people accountable for those next steps. So that's really the value that we see in interactive workshops. And like I said, it's really used to work through those collaborative approach challenges that we talked about on the previous slide. So Jim, anything to add here?
Yeah, Jeff, and I don't want to get back on my soapbox about change management again, but these interactive workshops, they're also, you can call them interactive planning sessions, right? Or IAPs, I think is a common TLA or three-letter acronym that we use. They're so crucial to successful change adoption, and they really should be done early and often, all throughout the project life cycle. And Jeff, I started thinking about something. Maybe speak a little bit about our retrospectives and the impact that those will have during a project.
Sure. At Matrix, we've switched away from having lessons learned at the end of the project to more of a retrospective approach. And you may or may not know the word retrospective. It comes from the agile world. But these are basically just sessions that are happening throughout the project. Times that we take a step back away from the project, get the project team, stakeholders together, and really just talk about how things are going. We talk about, you know, what's working, what do we want to continue working, what should become a best practice if it's not already. Or on the other side, if things aren't working, what's not working, and what do we need to work on to improve those. And doing it throughout the project really gives us that opportunity to make improvements for that project. Whereas in the old world with lessons learned at the end of the project, it was too late to really make any improvements for the project. And you had to hope they had a similar project coming up where you could apply those learnings to that project. So one more thing about retrospectives is it's important to go through and understand what's working, what's not working. But then it's really important to have actionable activities coming out of that where you can make improvements or maybe experiment with something new to see if it works between that first retrospective and the next one. Okay, anything else on that topic?
I'm good, Jeff. Great.
All right. So another aspect from through the lens of the process is leverage best practices. And so it's all about setting expectations of how we will work and then updating the best practices from learnings. As teams change direction or take on new types of projects or activities, it's important to make sure that all project scenarios are covered through processes, procedures, and guides appropriately. So it's setting expectations, how we operate, identifying those best practices. They may be from previous projects, they may be brought up during that project, following those, and then improving along the way. If things change, you may have to change outside factors change, you may have to change your best practices along the way. So it's important to keep up with those. At Matrix, we use the ISO standards process. We follow that for all of our processes, procedures, and guides. What that does for us is it helps us govern the documentation of those standards, the use of those standards on a regular basis, and then also the improvement of those standards as we go forward. As we go through that on an annual basis where we're audited, and basically, throughout the year, we're making sure that we're keeping up on those standards, the documentation and things like that for them. So it's really a good process. One thing important when you're looking at best practices is you need to fit all the various types of project scenarios in there. So you need to look at your smallest to your largest projects to make sure they fall within your process. You may not use every step of the process every single time, but they need to fall within that defined process. And then the last point is that I like to call these standardized yet adaptable. So you're setting a standard, you're using it, but then if you see areas where it could be improved or needs to change because of other factors, you are adapting that and using the adapted standard moving forward.
This is such a great conversation. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, I was just going to say, if there's anything else you want to add to it, Jim.
I was thinking this, and I don't know whether you got one pulled up, but maybe bring up one of our one of our processes, right? I was thinking maybe P9 is an example, and run through the phases of that overall process. It may help to clarify for the audience what we mean when we say best practices.
Sure. All right, so Jim mentioned P9. Matrix has an overall process for different disciplines to manage projects and execute projects. The manufacturing intelligence section of the execution portion of that is called P9 execution. So basically, you see it here defined. It's basically we're getting input from our pre-engineering process, which is really our discovery and high-level design process that we go through for projects. And then we come into the P9 process. And so the way we've defined this is basically for new solutions, new projects where we're doing work. It's more of an agile, iterative, and incremental approach where we're incrementally delivering value to that client. And at the end, we'll have basically a product or a solution that we're going to go through and go through installation commissioning to get that actually out into the environment to operate. In the cases where we have multiple lines or multiple plants where we're applying a solution, the second time through the process for the second line or second site, it's already been defined for the most part and developed in the iterative approach. And so the second time it may come back through more of a waterfall or linear approach where we're doing a little bit of planning up front, a little bit of design, detailed design, some development. It's really based on any customizations for that second line or second site. And then we'll implement those through the same installation and commissioning.
So Jeff, this kind of also speaks to you say we finish an iterative sprint, if you will, to develop a very specific functionality, let's call it on a piece of packaging equipment, and that's completed. So having the ability to go back through the existing solution would be maybe to extend additional functionality to that piece of equipment or subsystem, or potentially scale that out to different lines. So kind of both of those areas feels like this is the good fit there. All right, thanks.
Sure. So yeah, having a best practice like this, it just makes it very consistent when we're executing projects, knowing which one to hit, which lane here to hit based on new solution, existing solution.
Awesome.
Okay, so now looking at things through tools, lens of tools. So basically, focus execution, like I said, is important to look through people, process, and then tools. So tools really support both people and processes. And the tools are enablers for those two processes. They help us do things like brainstorm, strategize, track progress, collaborate, manage, and things like that. And so what I did is broke down a few different types of tools that we use to give some examples here. And then I'll probably hop into Miro and give you a few examples and show you kind of some things that we've done in that as well, because that's one that we use on a pretty regular basis. So Miro is something we use for online whiteboard collaboration. So it's what I hopped into to look at the process. It's basically a virtual whiteboard. It's just like if you're in a conference room and using whiteboard to put stickies up, draw pictures, put other documentation up there where you're going to work together to collaborate through that. It's a wonderful product that we use on a regular basis. Video conferencing and document code development. April of 2020, about a month after we went remote, Matrix switched over to Microsoft Teams from Skype. Now, Skype wasn't a bad thing, but Teams has added a lot of capabilities to us, better video conferencing, more tools, areas that we can save documents and things like that and collaborate on those documents. So it's been a great tool for us. And they keep on adding more and more capabilities to the video conferencing that are very useful. Office 365 is something we've adopted also, and the nice thing about that is you can have multiple people in a document co-developing at the same time. Whereas in the old documents where you had it on your desktop, if one person is in, it was locked to others. So it's nice being able to do that side by side. On a prototyping standpoint, like I mentioned for software development projects, one of the steps that we do go through is to develop prototypes for screens for navigation and functionality before we ever start developing. And the important part of that is to walk through with the end users that are going to be using it to make sure it makes sense to them. And as you look at drop downs, make sure you get the right elements in those drop downs and make sure we're not missing something. It's much easier to go through and use a prototype for that and identify those things that are missing than to try to add them later after something's already been developed. So we use actually Miro again for that, and we also use PowerPoint for that. It's a pretty quick and it's a little rough prototyping, but it works well for the purpose of getting in front of users. As far as managing work for our Agile projects, we use Azure DevOps, and that's a great way to break things down by product, by functionality of the product, user stories or requirements, and tasks, and keep everyone on the same page as far as what's happening in each of those areas. We've also used Trello, which is kind of an online Kanban board, which looks at columns of things like what's your backlog, what's work in progress, what's being blocked, and what's done. Again, just keeping everyone on the same page as far as who's doing what and where each of those stands. The last element is getting feedback from people, and we use a product called Menti. It's short for Mentimeter, and what it is, it's a product where you can get in, you can assign a meeting code where people actually sign into Menti, and you'll ask them questions along the way to get interactive feedback. You may do a survey, you may ask them to type in some words of how they're feeling about something, and it creates like a word cloud for you. But it's a great way to get, especially for remote meetings nowadays that we're all facing, it's a great way to get feedback from people on an interactive level and keep them engaged in the conversation better. We'll also use Microsoft Forms for that, for projects, to get some upfront information from people to help us better plan for the projects as well. So those are a few. I will switch over to Miro here. Give you a quick review of a couple things that we use it for. So as you see, you can zoom in and out. It's a pretty much almost never ending canvas. And so you can put a lot on one canvas, but as you zoom in, you can drag things in here. You can insert PDFs, you can insert stickies and shapes and lines and pins and things like that. So this is an example here when we were going through and refining our process, the P9 process. We just brought a picture of that in, an image of that in, and basically we had 3 people working on this. We had people, crossing things out, making notes, adding new shapes to it for the process flow, putting notes down below. So it's just a great way to do that, and then get together and talk about what you're looking at. Next example is basically planning out a workshop. This is a tool I use basically to look at basically the date or the time frame that you have for a workshop and put in activities in blue, types of activities in yellow, notes about them. So you kind of plan out, what the durations are for things. So you basically know if you have a full day, what does that day look like and how are you going to, when are you going to take breaks, when are you going to take lunch, and how much time are each of the activities going to take. So it's a great way because you can smooth things around very easily. It's others can get in, take a look at it. You can review it with them as well. So it makes it very easy to collaborate using that. This is one we actually use for a couple of projects where we want to make sure that everyone's aligned on accountabilities and responsibilities. So we have this RACI chart here. We've identified the activities across the top here of what has to happen on that project. And the people that I changed the names here to protect the innocent, but who's responsible or who's on that project, and then basically looking at things like, I don't know if you can see it very well here, but red is accountable, green is responsible, C is consulted, and pink is informed. So very quickly, we had people go through and basically mark down what they felt like they were accountable for, responsible for, or something else, and then had conversations to make sure that everything was covered in there, and we're able to make sure that everything has someone accountable and responsible for each item. But having them just get into the Miro board to do this, everyone was able to drag items up to their names and their activities at the same time. So it made a very productive activity.
The couple that we did on that, Jeff, it was so impactful to me because the efficiency gained in developing that RACI chart and that race or the RACI matrix. What used to take, a good solid hour of going through and having deep dialogue and picking one at a time, having everybody doing it once and then going and asking the team under a specific task, just a couple of key questions, and all of a sudden you start moving around again. And within 15 minutes, I think we had the entire RACI chart made up for a very complex project. It was really impactful to me.
Yep, and then the beauty is that after we were done, we just created a PDF from the Miro board and shared it with everyone, so they had documentation of what we discussed.
Yep.
So last example is one I brought up is a exercise we use in retrospective sometimes. It's called the sailboat exercise. So it's really a metaphor to see how things are operating on a team. So you've got a sailboat with the sail. And then below the water, you've got an anchor dragging along the way. So basically, we look at two things and ask people two questions. What's working well, or what's the wind in your sails? And have them use Post-its and put Post-it notes up top and listing those things that are working well at that point. And then we also ask them, what's holding you back, or what's, where are you dragging your anchor, or where's that anchor being dragged? And have them give feedback on that as well. So we'll give them, 5 minutes or so to do that. We'll discuss them. We'll do some brainstorming on how we can improve those. And then, like I said before, we'll walk away with basically some actionable steps to take. And, depending on the project, this can take a half hour, or maybe a little bit more for a larger project, or for more people, but it's really a quick and easy way. And Miro allows us once again to have everyone to get into the same board and do it at the same time to add that feedback. So just a few examples to show kind of the power of Miro, but we found that's one of those things that we found that in these days of working remotely, you really need some really good tools to keep your teams engaged and keep that feedback coming. Anything else to add, Jim?
Yeah, the more I think about this, we've seen this incredible, horrible effects of global supply chain disruptions due to COVID. And then added to that, work environments literally being turned upside down. However, the use of tools like this and many others have not only continued to enable the team dynamic, but even when we're not together in the same office or room, it's really helped to maintain and maybe in a lot of instances gain project execution efficiency. Remote work took a little bit of time to dial into today, but it's becoming our new normal, and I don't see it changing anytime soon, simply because of the efficiencies gained. And we're getting really good at it because of tools like this. So thanks for, this was a great part of this, and hopefully everybody has good takeaways on this one.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions about any of these tools or how we use them, please feel free to reach out to either Jim and I, and we can provide some additional feedback.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to wrap up, keys to our success, like I talked about, it's really through the lens of people, process, and tools. And from a people standpoint, it starts with the shared culture and values to make sure everyone's on the same page, operating, working the same way, looking at things the same way. And it's really about that collaborative approach and looking at how you solve your biggest challenges through collaboration. It's no longer, back in the day, people would be sitting in their office trying to solve problems by themselves and then trying to implement those. And I think we're in a much better place now with all the collaboration and tools and things like that we have going on to help us do that together. From a process standpoint, like I mentioned, the interactive workshops, we find those very valuable. Looking at them from a bringing subject matter experts together, people that actually do the work and are the experts at what that is, and then leveraging a neutral facilitator to really guide them through the process and getting them to a point where there's decision and clear next steps. Best practices and adaptive standards, also very important to make sure that you are following a consistent process and making improvements to that process as necessary as well. From a tool standpoint, we talked about several types of tools. They're very useful to use, especially now in these days of a lot of remote work or hybrid teams. I consider it hybrid team, a team where you've got one or two people maybe in an office, but anyone else, if you have anyone that's remote, I consider that a hybrid team because you really have to adopt the way you do things because not everyone's face to face in the same location. So we looked at some tools that from a collaboration standpoint, help you collaborate better, some prototyping tools to basically get some ideas of navigation, functionality, things like that out in front of people before you start developing, ways to manage projects through tools, and then ways to get feedback from folks on the project and the stakeholders, especially if they're not in person. Anything else to add here, Jim?
Jeff, I don't. Nothing to add on this specific slide. Great. I think this presentation was so impactful. Being able to go out and say, I want to do a project's one thing. Being able to execute with focus and clarity is a whole other thing. So thank you for all you did in putting the slide together. Why don't we kick on to the last slide and we'll open up for Q&A.
Yeah. So are there any questions?
A couple that have popped in. One of them is really interesting. It's do you prefer in-person collaboration as compared to remote collaboration? And are there certain things that require one or the other? What are your thoughts on that one?
I think in-person is typically preferred. It's nice to be face-to-face with people, have that interaction, have those informal conversations and things like that. But I don't think it's not always possible anymore. When we had limitations with travel with COVID, we were pretty much stuck in the office or stuck at home. Couldn't really travel to see clients and do some of the work that we typically would do in face-to-face. But I think with some of the tools, it's become a little bit easier to do some remote work. Personally, I think what I prefer typically is getting face-to-face first if possible. And it really gives you a chance to kind of develop that professional relationship a bit, even if it's just a day or two. And then that just really enables remote conversations and remote work together to be a little bit more effective because you've already met that person. And like I said, with some of the tools today, we're doing more and more remote, but it is nice to have that face-to-face initially. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Jim.
No, I think you covered it well. I think it's No, I don't. It'd be just rhetoric at this point. So, one other one here. I hope you can dig into a little bit. Different size projects, right? You have these large behemoth projects, and you have the smaller. I think you spoke a little bit about it as far as the iterative state running through. But how does this process change between those two?
So the defined process that we have that we use for projects, is that you think that's what they're.
And how does the process change really for different types of projects, whether larger versus smaller?
Okay, one way we look at basically using the best practices and standardized processes, procedures, and guides is that I guess you could say we define them for that project where you have to do everything, where there's a lot of detail, a lot of steps, and things like that. So basically you're covered when you're doing that large detailed project with knowing what has to be done within the processes. Now understanding you have different size projects also. So sometimes they're medium sized or lower size projects. We may not have the need for all those steps. So sometimes we do what we call like a pre-engineering, a full pre-engineering, or sometimes it's what we call pre-engineering light, where you're just picking out basically at the kickoff or the internal kickoff of the project. We're saying, okay, instead of doing A through Z, we may pick out 4 or 5 different aspects of that, just to hit the high points and really hit what's necessary for that project. But it's nice because you do have that full selection to pick from. And you can go through as a team and collaborative is say, yes, we need that, we need that, we need that, we don't really need that, don't need that, don't need that. But it's almost like picking from a menu at a restaurant. You're picking basically what you feel is necessary for that project. So yeah, I would say just in summary, I'd say define them all and then use them as needed for the appropriate project.
Awesome. That's all that I'm seeing at this point. Please, audience chime in, or as Jeff said, feel free to reach out to he or I. If you're going to get a chance to watch this on our YouTube channel, that'd be great. Jeff, if you've got nothing, I think I'll take a minute and thank everybody for joining us today, and be on the lookout for the invitation to the 6th and the final webinar. I spoke about it earlier. It's November 30th at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time, closing out this session on managing change, making change stick. So really look forward to that one, and who knows what the next webinar series will be about. Thank you again for today. Jeff, thank you. Great job.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.